'Cause I'll be there for you, 'cause we care for you. You're there for me too, my friend. I know it's hard sometimes when you feel left behind. Tell me what's on your mind. Why do this on your own? Yeah, 'cause I'll be there for.
We're live.
We're
I've always
live.
wanted
We're
to say that.
live. Welcome to Johnny's Chats. Here we have Manny Hernandez all the way from California, USA. How are ya?
I'm doing good, man. I'm a little anxious. I'm always anxious. I'm a writer by craft, right? A
Yeah.
paramedic, actually, but writing is my passion. So I wrote all of these notes to talk about. I get very nervous with speaking. Please bear with me. I'm trying. I'm facing my fears here, right?
Yeah. That's cool, man. It's cool. Yeah, well, let's go straight into it then. Like, would you want to tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing with yourself and that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to start, like I said, I wrote it out much more beautifully than I could ever say it on my own. So I'm going to read from my notes first, try to bear with me. And then as we go,
Yeah.
you're going to ask me some questions. I'm going to talk off the cuff about stuff as well. But is that
Cool.
cool with you?
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. My name is Manuel Hernandez. My middle name is Antonio. I'm a first generation American. I'm born to a Cuban family from Spanish roots originally. So they migrated from Spain to Cuba, and I'm first generation born here in the United States. Um, Early on, I knew I wanted to be something like a doctor or a soldier or, to be in the action of things. And I always wanted to be like a pilot, a Navy SEAL. I never knew just one thing. I wanted to be everything. I wanted to be Leonardo da Vinci. Um, for various reasons, and all that will become apparent in a moment. So I ended up eventually becoming a paramedic. I got police and tactical training, and I served on a rescue. You would call 911 emergency, and I would show up with firefighters and police, the whole nine yards. And I worked in emergency rooms. I worked in private transport, and finally, the capstone of my career was going overseas and working as a contractor in war zones. Recently, I've been working COVID in the United States with, a few large organizations, which I won't mention because they're probably going to be hiring me again soon. So, I can only talk about it after. But, I'm currently on my becoming a critical care and flight paramedic, which is considered the capstone within paramedicine, and then getting my bachelor's degree. So I've been doing this work for about 8 years now, three of which I spent overseas in active war zones. I've also been trained as a private military contractor, as a canine tactical medic, and I've completed various like charity and cultural missions throughout the world. I don't want to harp on that stuff too much because there's a lot of guys who've done a lot more than me and who've excelled much, much more and who really, that are much more accomplished. So I'm by no means like the most accomplished. Hats off to the guys out there who've done more and been through more, and the guys who are holding the line today for sure.
Yeah.
But this is just to say it's not something I'm new at. I know the field. I know what it's like in that world, and I know what the connected worlds are like because I've lived in it for a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of that to most people who aren't in the world, that world, that all sounds very, impressive. That only the strongest people can be in that world of EMS and military and police and stuff like that, because it demands the toughest of us, right? But
Yeah.
I'm here to blow the top off of that. Not to say these people aren't strong. These people are very, very strong. They've been through a lot, usually from a very early age. Whether you're born into something or whether you're born with it, either way, I kind of want to blow the top off of the impressiveness of all of that, because as impressive it can be to like serve and do all of those things, it comes with a really high cost.
Yeah.
The and it's killing us in droves, to be completely honest with you. Like, many of us, ask any friend, if you have a firefighter, a police officer in your family, ask them if they know somebody who's, lost their life to suicide or depression, or who struggles with PTSD or shell shock. And almost every single one of them does. They'll probably crack a joke about it because they're not going to get into their feelings for
Yeah.
sure. That's the
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
And that's what's killing us. That's what I want to kind of address. It drives us into alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, loss of jobs, loss of families. 50%, 60% of our marriages crumble on average. We're living in pretty much a
Wow.
mess. Yeah, and it's built
Yeah.
into our system, it's built into our culture, it's built into basically the way that our job is run. And we've been told that it's normal. It's not just a job thing, it's kind of a cultural thing.
Yeah.
I noticed that it's found its way into the entire American culture, and not just American culture. Thanks to that, it's become Western culture, because America became kind of a center of culture in so many places,
Yeah.
Hollywood and movie industry and music and stuff like that. It
Yeah.
starts to pervade into everything. And you notice all of the countries that hold our culture as the highest culture, they're starting to share our problems as well.
Yeah. Of course.
And
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and that trickles down even into mental health, which is kind of crazy. So
Yeah.
I noticed that our society has changed gradually from being one that was very wholesome and very kind of solid and grounded in certain values, and it's become the most highly medicated and quite violent and unhappy societies. And unfortunately, over there on the other side of the pond where you guys are, brother, it's
Yeah.
it's happening over there too. And it's happening in France, it's happening all throughout Europe. And I'm noticing this change as I went over there, where, in America, it's quite everything is a country of extremes here, right? So we
Mhm.
notice it with extremes with our drug problem, which has become a multi-million dollar industry, the anti-drug industry, which has become, it's fueled kind of our police state, which is kind of boiling over now with BLM and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
All of this stuff, all of these deaths, all of the murders, all of the human trafficking and children being lost and people dying of the opiate overdose and all this madness, it's all related to a mental health issue, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
society is self-medicating. It's
Yeah.
self-medicating trauma. It's self-medicating all of the damage that we accumulate throughout life rather than treating it and healing it. And I think that now, for the first time, all of this stuff is coming out into the light, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
People like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, they're making it okay to talk about mental health, to talk
Mm.
about PTSD. It's awesome. And now your podcast, you're coming out and you're getting into real the details because these guys, they're really famous people. They don't really reveal too much. They have like a face to
Yeah.
keep up. And,
Yeah.
so average people like us, we can't really get out there and, get into the depth of it and be like, who can I reach out to? What is
Yeah.
this person really going through? What was the shit that you went through? It can't get as
Yeah.
personal. So hopefully at the end of this talk, all of those things will make a bit more sense together. Um, I first became interested in mental health by accident. You know, I'm not sure how much detail I can go into. I'm happy to go into much more and share it, but just to keep it brief to start, there's a test called the ACEs test. So that's
Yeah.
Adverse Childhood
Yeah.
Event Survey. Have you ever taken that before?
I haven't. No, I hadn't even heard about it until you mentioned it. To be honest.
It's an amazing thing, man. Like it's something that was developed in the US, but you'll never guess how it was developed. It was developed when they were studying people who were obese because we have a huge obesity problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's no
Yeah.
pun intended. It's actually becoming more common to be obese than it is to be a regular weight, in the
Yeah.
US.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they were wondering why all this stuff is happening. And then, they found that there's a correlation between trauma and weight problems. Here, all right, cool. Just making sure. Sorry, my computer was giving me some trouble.
Yeah. No
So,
worries.
yeah, there's a direct correlation between childhood trauma. So they were finding that all these people who were obese, it was related to some trauma in their past. And then they started to, drag it out, and they found that it wasn't just a link to obesity. It was a link, and this is a scientific study that's been performed on this. Anybody can go and look up what this is caused by, the evidence behind this. And I'm a paramedic myself. So I tend to look for scientific evidence for the things I say. So everything I'll be sharing with you, there are things that are backed by double-blind, placebo-controlled, like golden standard scientific studies that are available for anyone to see online.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
this one in particular is about the ACEs test, and they found that people who have adverse childhood events, right, like rape at a young age or at any age for that matter, like seeing your mother or your father beaten, like having a close family, member going to prison, like seeing a family member high or, in some altered state, like, any of these things that are really heavy things,
Yeah.
sometimes even things that are not so heavy that we consider normal, like being beaten by a parent or being ignored for a day or something like that, right? These all are directly linked to higher incidence of depression, higher incidence of PTSD, higher incidence of suicide, of self-harm, of obesity, of eating disorders. all kinds of really heavy stuff. Like that translates into billions of dollars in medical healthcare costs, in psychiatric rehabilitation costs, and possibly a lot of that translates into drug use, right? Like people who have these problems are times, 1,000 times more likely, or perhaps it was 1,000%, big difference. It's a factor of 10 difference. But either way, at least 10 times more likely to use illegal drugs, right? To get into promiscuous behaviors. Like this affects people's entire lives and nobody's talking about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
It's,
the small details that
yeah.
looking, you know.
It's nuts. It leads to like autoimmune diseases and all of this stuff. So, and then a lot of us were raised in these environments. We're not familiar with what's normal, with what's healthy. We never really find out, hey, I went through a lot of really crazy stuff. And then our parents or, our friends or people in our culture will tell us, that's just how it is, dude. Like you had a great upbringing. What was wrong with your upbringing? Like you had food, you had, all the basics of life. But what they don't see, the pernicious scars underneath is, well, they were also raised in a family where alcoholism was normal, or they were raised by a narcissistic family structure where,
Mm,
you're not even really sure what, is wrong with the family because it looks good on the outside. So
yeah,
I really became quite confused because outwardly, I grew up in a family where everything was very superficially normal. Like
mm,
my dad, buckled down. He went to medical school. He made a lot of, very incredible successes in the outer world, for which, he deserves all the respect due for that. But what people couldn't see was kind of, the family background. It's a performance-based family background, and it's very common in narcissistic families. And usually, what you'll find is that when people are not healthy, they can't raise healthy children, and they're
mm,
not aware of where their weaknesses are. So naturally, you grow up in a family structure, you're missing out on a lot of things, and you don't even know what you're missing. You kind of have to reach out and find something. So that's what I did. I started to try to figure out what's real, what's normal. Why do I have all of these deep inner senses of like sadness and anger and anxiety and despair, and why am I so scared of everything? And what's going on with me? So I started reaching out to therapists, and I started looking at certain materials that I want to share with you all for anybody out there. And dude, feel free to interrupt me, cut me off, ask me questions at any time, right?
yeah,
Because I
cool,
wrote quite
man.
a
No,
bit here.
no,
All
no.
right.
Yeah, it's good stuff you're talking about, man. And I just want to let you like, you know what I mean. I don't want to interrupt the flow, man, at all.
Right
So
on. Right on.
yeah,
All right, I appreciate that,
I
man.
mean,
No
if
worries.
there's anything you want to like, if you've got it there on the screen, if you want to screen share it, sort of thing, like that
Sure.
would be beneficial because then people could like just go straight to the link. Also, I will plug the sites that we talk about, and you can send me them afterwards, and I'll put them in the bio of the podcast of the episode once it's published.
Awesome. All right, that would be good, dude. Yeah, I think it might be better that way with the notes because this is on my phone and this is on my computer. I'm not sure how to make them talk yet. I'm still learning all this stuff.
Yeah. They'll be able to do it by themselves soon.
I guess so. Either that or I can send you some screenshots. We'll do it the old-fashioned way, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
It's
but
like you're
yeah,
digging through
well,
my
yeah,
phone.
yeah. But anyway, as you were saying,
Well, I was saying, about that deep confusion. A lot of people don't know that's actually the hardest part of getting help is it's like
yeah,
sometimes recognizing, like
just be
I
aware
was
of that sort of thing. Yeah,
Yeah, man, it really is because for me, I grew up in this family. Everything outwardly was okay. At least that's what I thought, right? And mind you, I had a very high ACEs score. Like there was sexual abuse in my family, there was emotional abuse, there was mental abuse, there was physical abuse. I had all the different types of abuse. There was prison, there was murder in my family. Like I had
oh,
crazy shit happen, right? And I thought me, right? I thought my family wasn't so bad. Like, look at these other people that were like tortured or, they were,
yeah,
chained in a cage. You always think of what's worse. So you don't
yeah,
validate your own, suffering and experience. So even with all of that shit, I was like, man, somebody has it worse. So I must not be that bad. It wasn't until I started to actually like look through these books in particular. And I'll share with you guys these books because I would try to go to therapists often, and there are some good therapists out there, but I was very unlucky. I found some very unhealthy therapists, and it makes sense because if you're unhealthy, you will choose unhealthy people. You're going to choose unhealthy partners, you're going to choose unhealthy friends,
yeah, yeah,
you're going to
yeah,
choose unhealthy therapists too
yeah,
because
yeah,
you don't see the red flags. So this was what really got me started to the point where I started to heal to a point that I could actually select a healthier therapist and select healthier friends and create a healthier life for myself, because it has to start within you, you know? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the first book I read was Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And that kind of set me off a little bit because I was like, adult children, I'm a grown ass man. You know how it is. You want to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
so what I noticed was, I was having a lot of things in common um, in terms of my relationship habits with people who were alcoholic. Like, here's what I mean. I was not an alcoholic myself, right? But I tended to attract women who had had alcoholic fathers and who had been sexually abused and who had some kind of emotional abuse in their history and who had a bad relationship with their fathers. Like, all of these very similar qualities. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what is that? So I started to think, man, I'm fine, but they're really messed up. That's how we always start, right? Everyone else is really messed up. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
understand this.
yeah,
So let's figure this
yeah,
out.
yeah,
So I found out that they are what's called codependent, right? So I was like, well, that's weird. Why do I only date codependent women? Still not getting it, by the way,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
eventually, once you date, however many, and I've dated my fair share. I went through and I started to realize, okay, Manny, there's a common denominator here, and it's not them, it's me. So what is wrong with me that I attract these people?
Of
So
course. Yeah.
I started to dig into that. I learned about codependency. I learned about, narcissistic families and their effect on people. I learned about PTSD. I learned about all of these different psychiatric issues, And I actually had a real starter course in that because my first marriage, I was 21 years old, really naive, codependent as heck. And I found a borderline personality disordered woman who, was incredibly bad for me, let's say. That was a really crazy 4 years. I learned quite a bit, and I can laugh about some of those stories now. But man, it was a ride. And for someone who doesn't know what that is, to suddenly be thrown in with like essentially a tiger, like any psychiatrist will tell you for decades, they didn't even treat people with borderline because they would like throw off the psychologist. They would like mess with their heads.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
there's
yeah,
treatment, right? Now there's treatment. So any borderlines out there, don't hate me, right? There's treatment for you. You can find help. There's cognitive behavioral therapy. It works. It will change your life in the biggest way. I want nothing but goodness and healing, compassion for you. So no hate, no negativity towards y'all. Y'all are brothers and sisters too. Just more traumatized, and sometimes hurt people will hurt people. So no
right.
static. Um, but I will say that book was the first one that the therapist gave me. Then I learned about toxic parents. That's another one. The Body Keeps the Score, which talked about trauma. Um, Childhood Disrupted, which was huge. By the way, these are pretty heavy reading topics. So kind of like pace yourself. Don't be like, I'm going to read all of these this month. You'll be so depressed. Like, just take some time.
Yeah, bit by bit.
Yeah, it's rough to go through. It is.
Yeah.
Uh, Lost Connections by Johan Hari was a really good one. That's a good one to start with because it shows you why we're so depressed as a culture and how to actually fix that. And that medication is actually usually not the answer. And that's a more positive one. A General Theory of Love, When Love is a Lie, Emotional Intelligence. That was a really good one too, because a lot of us we grow up with emotionally immature parents who can't receive our grief, they can't receive our anger, so we learn to repress those. And then instead of repressing them, it becomes easier when you don't know what it is you're repressing. So some people can't recognize it. And you can always see this on people when you know what to look for. Like, you ever seen that one friend who's like really angry and you're like, "Why are you so angry, man?" He's like, "I'm not angry, dude. I'm not angry." Like that. That's that's we joke about that, right? And we're like, "Oh, that dude, man." But the reality of it is that actually has a tragic background. That's
Yeah,
from repressing anger for an entire lifetime to the point where that person doesn't see it on themselves anymore. There's no connection with the self, right? So we disconnect from our own selves. So we don't stop feeling our emotions. They're still there, but they run us because we're not able to see them. Excuse me.
yeah.
We're not able
So
to see them.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so we can't see them. We can't be like, dude, I'm really anxious right now. Like, I need to do something about this. Or, oh, I'm really angry. I better not go talk to her. Or, oh, man, I'm really sad right now. I probably, shouldn't take this alcohol right now. No, like, we don't see that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that leads to problems in our relationships. It leads to problems in our marriages. It leads to problems in our personal lives with our jobs, right? It trickles down into every single thing in our life.
Mm.
And this is something that we're seeing a lot with service personnel because we're taught to suppress all that stuff even more. Military tells you, good job, suppress all that stuff, right? Police officers, they're told to stand here and just look at somebody while someone's yelling in their face, right? They have to suppress a lot of feelings. That causes
Yeah,
a very toxic blend inside that ends up, how can you not medicate when you can't emote, you know?
yeah, yeah,
We're trying to medicate away feelings because these feelings have been rejected by our society. We have to
yeah,
embrace
yeah,
these. That's the only way. So
yeah,
that
yeah,
that's kind of what I wanted to start on. And in general, I want to say to anybody who's like really vibing with all this stuff and being like, you know what, that sounds like a lot of the same stuff I went through. Is a lot to deal with. I just want to say it sucks that we were given in some ways it's an advantage at the very end, right? Because you've had to build your way into some things that other people, just received, right?
yeah,
You get to learn, and not only that, but you get to pull other people behind you because you walk that path. So in a way, it's a blessing, but at the beginning, it feels like a huge curse. It feels very intimidating,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like, I will say to all you people who are hurting out there, like it is unfair and it's a shitty deal, my friend, But at the same time, it's up to you now to grab a hold of it, to accept it for what it is. This is what it is, right? And to see it's still your life. You can get so much more out of life. It can get so much better. And it's within your power to do something about it today. And it could be just choosing, today I'm just going to breathe. There are some days, where I was just like, if I just get through today and I just keep breathing, that's enough. I was
Yeah,
so
yeah,
depressed, right?
yeah,
There
right.
were some days where I was like, you know what, today I'm just gonna go to the gym. I don't even feel like lifting weights, but I'm just gonna go there. So I just went there.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And I just walked around and I came back and I built a habit little by little. There's so many resources. There's people like you doing this podcast, reaching out to other people, There's books online. There's other people who are willing to reach out. Like, it's up to us to own it and to start this healing work for our generation so we don't pass this on to
yeah.
our kids or to our friends or to other societies. I
It's,
know you really vibe with that.
yeah, 100%, man. It's something that, like you said, it might feel like a curse, but once you start doing the work and getting through to it and doing the healing, it's a service to humanity, man. Like, like we've got to do this collectively, and it's going to take each one of us to do it. Go on our own sort of path of healing
Right.
and and I can't think of the word, but
Hmm.
anyway, fixing ourselves, and then together that will change everything, like that will bring everybody closer together. I mean, there's like you said, the people in this, like that don't feel it already. They're not going down that path of healing, but they will, and so it's going to take the people that are struggling now to get through, get to the other side,
Hmm.
do the healing, and then be the guide for the next ones that come through, because it's going to be a collective thing. This is just the start.
Absolutely,
Like,
dude.
it's been like the ain't like I don't know, the wise men around the world, like the have been talking about this era coming in for a long
Hmm.
time. I
Hmm.
can't remember, going into the age of Aquarius, is it?
Yeah,
And
that's right.
the awakening.
Aquarius right here. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 like that's it. We're going into this awakening, which is going to be potentially going to take us to the next level, which might be going back to what we were, where we used to allow emotion to roll through and flow with it. But then might have got scared of an emotion and started blocking it off, and then built a whole society built upon that. And now
Yep.
we've got to go back and we've got to do the healing, do the work, and just keep going, and then
Absolutely, man.
provide better future, man.
Yeah,
Like, and
absolutely.
it's right there in front of us, like
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever reason, wherever this virus came from, or whatever, like, it's put the whole planet on lockdown.
Yeah, it
So
has.
like, and like it's a big sign that we've got to, like, and a lot more people, like, obviously it's hard for them, and this is why I wanted to reach out and do this podcast and
Hmm.
reach as
Hmm.
many people as possible. That it's like it feels like a curse, like you said. It does feel like a curse at the start, but once you start doing the work and getting through, will start seeing the blessings, man. It's
Hmm.
all a calling to develop us into better people and a better, better service for this planet, like for our
Absolutely.
future generations and everything, man.
I
Yeah,
could
man.
I could I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, I really think that this is kind of a spiritual awakening happening. And here's what all God's honest truth. I know it sounds, a little bit woo because it's a bit into the spiritual realm. So these are just my beliefs.
Yeah,
But I do notice, a lot of prophecies have talked about that stuff. Age of Aquarius, every religion, has shared some,
yeah,
thing about a new age. And what I notice is that those of us who are having the most trouble right now, we're also the most awake because we're the ones who notice I'm in dysfunction. And some
yeah,
of us are led there by a catastrophe. Our life breaks down. We're actually the lucky ones because there's people who go through their whole life,
yeah,
become very successful, don't have the major obstacles, or they're so capable and so resourceful that they can conquer them. They make it to the end of their life and never have a full emotional expression. Some of them kill themselves very late in life. They
yeah,
suffer incredible depression, or they lose everything, or not truly, fulfilled. I see people who are as famous as Robin Williams, loved by the world, a celebrity. He accomplished so much, but he
yeah.
didn't learn that deep feeling, that depression, all these other things inside. It was an emotional stirring to wake
Right.
up to himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And he didn't have the tools that we have today, and maybe he did, and he just didn't know that they were out there.
that's
So
it. Yeah,
we're blessed because we have a breakdown that leads us into a breakthrough, and that's the only
yeah,
way that it can happen.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, man. So I had my breakdown very, very recently. I had a lot of crazy stuff happen that showed me, dude, I need to get this handled. Before, I was just, how most people do. Like, I couldn't consider getting any kind of help
yeah,
because that's just the way things are. Everybody's just like, okay, we're just gonna do this thing every weekend. We're just gonna get messed up. We're always gonna go out and just chase girls and chase
yeah,
drugs
yeah,
and chase
yeah,
parties and drink it up. And it becomes like a celebration. Like everyone's like, this is the cool thing to do, man. What's wrong with you? Why can't you just enjoy? But it's
yeah,
masking things. It's masking a symptom. It's masking that there is something inside of you. There is a spirit or a primitive human inside of you that was built in a very different environment, that was built in an environment where you knew the same 100 or 50 or 150 people for your whole life. You
yeah,
were
yeah,
regularly around them. You built real connections. Anytime you were missing, somebody would be like, where is this person? Let's go find, John, because where is he? I haven't seen him today. Yeah, let's go grab him, where there was much more intimacy, there was much more touch. That we're not built to be in these little caves that we call homes and to go to work and to not touch
yeah,
any other human being. And you know
that's
what I'm
it.
saying? And see all these strangers. This is anxiety provoking. Our ancient animal in this new cage, we're living in captivity and it's become normal. We call it
Yeah,
society. It's caused a lot
yeah,
of very unhealthy things in us, a lot of amazing things, right? But
yeah,
we need to adjust to this. And we are the ones who are not adjusted to society. That's okay, man. Like there's nothing too wrong with you because the reality is that society is not healthy. We have to learn to adjust to it, right?
100%.
And there's healthy ways of learning to adjust to society so we can cohabitate and we can contribute. But, these things that are mental illness, right? In certain situations, they actually would confer certain advantages. So, for example, me, I have PTSD, right? In ancient tribal society, I would have been the one who was vigilant at night, looking out, making sure anything that comes by, there's going to be an alert. I'm on high alert. I'm able to see and like pinpoint threats, right?
Yeah,
I was designed in this way so that I could genetically survive and it served the tribe. But now in society where that's not necessary, that's a major disadvantage, dude. That can really get in the way.
yeah,
Not able to relax, not able to have fun. The same with certain people who maybe become, depressed, or there's certain advantages that might have been conferred by those strategies, and in some cases it's just very miserable. Maybe there's no particular advantage. Maybe who knows? I don't know everybody's situation, but the ones that I've studied, I try to look for evolutionary reasons, and it makes a lot of sense why we've developed in these ways. Now, certain things are genetic, and certain things are completely the result of trauma, built up trauma over time, which is known as CPTSD. And sometimes in some cases, borderline may even be a result of this. So
but
just to kind of get back, go ahead.
sorry, what does the C stand for? So it's PTSD. What does the C stand for before
It's
it?
it stands for complex, and some people also substitute it as childhood. Now, it's not in the DSM-5, but to be completely honest with you, that is considered the golden standard by a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists. That's what they go off in the field. But there's a lot of things in there that even psychologists amongst themselves don't agree. And to be honest, it's a mental theory. It's a structural theory. Many of
Okay.
these these things are really proven, it's what they classify. You'll also notice some things that modern science has put out that the psychological organizations haven't really pivoted on. Like, for example, I did a lot of, I guess, literary reviews, which is just where you look at a lot of different research and you put together a message from that. So, looking at how psychology right now treats PTSD, depression, anxiety, drug addiction, all these things are separate to psychiatry. They're separate diagnoses. But in science, they're actually related to the same exact center. It's called the default mode network, right? This is the center that's affected by psychedelic drugs like LSD, like ayahuasca, like
Yeah,
mushrooms, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
even MDMA. So all of those centers are affected by the mechanism of mushrooms, and that is what's disrupted. How are all of those different things disrupted at the same time if they're separate? They're connected to the same part of the brain. They're just manifesting in different ways. So this is something that, psychology hasn't really caught up with yet at this time. Like I said, it's a structure of thinking. So when you look at CPTSD, to me, it makes a lot more sense. It's chronic PTSD that's basically developed over time. So some people, and even really any PTSD, how do I explain this? All right. Let me start at the beginning, right, of
Yeah, yeah,
PTSD,
always a
right?
good place to start.
That
Yeah,
that
yeah,
might help a little bit. So most people, I tell people I have PTSD just to simplify it, and they say, "Oh, when did you get it?" Almost like it's a virus I caught, right? Like, when
yeah,
did you catch
yeah,
that?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
2013 at this exact time. It's PTSD is actually a vulnerability in the brain. So a lot of us, either because we've been stunted genetically or not stunted, we're different genetically, kind of the way certain people are developed for certain things. Now,
Yeah,
in my case, that wasn't the case, right? In my case, it wasn't genetic. It was actually I developed from repeated traumas. So one incident can cause post-traumatic stress, and normally it will go away. I had so many incidents that caused post-traumatic stress in my early childhood that my brain became chronically adapted, like, okay, you're just going to have a hard life, buddy. So we're going to get you ready for this. And, it shrunk my hippocampus, it shrunk my amygdala, so that basically I have PTSD all the time, right?
yeah,
It's become how my brain is shaped. So
yeah.
for people who develop PTSD, some of them it's because their brain has been shaped that way over time. Some it's because it's genetic. The hippocampus controls memory. It controls getting, I believe. I could be getting these mixed up. The amygdala is the emotional center. So assuming I got those right, and maybe there'll be a correction later, usually what
Yeah,
happens is you see a sight, right? That sight will then, let's say it's at nighttime, right? And you see something big and bright moving towards you quickly. Your brain will immediately register that as a threat before you can think anything about it, right? It
yeah,
speaks to the emotional center, which then will speak to the rest of your body and respond and have quick reactions, and the cerebellum takes over all this stuff, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So in people with PTSD, normally, like in a normal person, let's say, there's an activation and then there's relaxation, right? The tiger chases you and then you relax and you laugh. You're like, oh, that was just, some dude with a tarp with a garbage bag, and he was moving
Yeah,
my way and he's just lost,
yeah, yeah,
when you're taking out the trash behind the store at night or something like that, and then you laugh about it. But in people with PTSD, it doesn't work that way. There's a continuous gating effect where something that's completely unrelated can trigger you. So for example, let's say there's someone in the classroom who has seen a very tragic event, like someone caught in a fire. This is something that happened to me. I saw somebody caught in a fire in their car. And then later on, when I was in the classroom, somebody was, erasing. And they were erasing with such ferocity, that I smelt burning rubber. And it took me back to the car and it regated, right? And people with PTSD, that's what will happen. So CPTSD is basically that, but it gets even to another level where I would not have a recollection of the exact memory. I would just all of a sudden I would have this intense rush of anxiety and I would feel like the world was ending. I felt like I was about to die. I wasn't sure why, but
yeah,
something my brain had seen had triggered it. But I'd become so disconnected from myself, I wasn't even aware what had triggered me. I just got all these emotions. So it becomes a little more confusing and difficult to tackle once it gets to that point. And that's when I had to be like, wow, I need to deal with this. Like this is something that's gotten to the point that I can't just medicate and ignore it, anymore.
of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what did you do? What avenues did you go? Who did you reach out to? Like, how did you go about it?
It was a pretty lonely journey at first, because not a lot of people who are therapists or psychologists recognize what that is. I actually had to go down the, non-traditional path. So I found out about CPTSD online. There was a lot of therapists and people who had, been failed by therapists talking about it online. And they had a lot of the same frustrations that I did with treatment, medication really just made them worse, which is how it was with me. I just ended up kind of numb. I didn't know, I wasn't being taught how to deal with my emotions, how to actually work through these things. And I didn't know how to take care of these emotions. There was so much piled under that I almost felt like I would die if I tapped into this huge reservoir of like grief and anger and all of this
Yeah,
stuff, right?
yeah,
So it's a
yeah,
scary thing to first start to try to, handle on your own. But I basically, it happened. I think I was just lucky, to be completely honest with you. Now, you guys listening to this don't have to be lucky, right? Because you found a podcast or, you're reaching out there, you're starting on your own. For me, I was in Ukraine and I got to the point where I was thinking about walking into a minefield, like on purpose,
uh,
and yeah, man, like I was thinking to myself about these things. We're on these long patrols. Sometimes I got a little bit scared because I was thinking about, this stuff, and I didn't feel scared anymore. I started to feel a sense of relief when I
yeah,
thought about it happening. And that's when I was like, man, I need help, like something's not right. And I
yeah,
told myself, all right, I'm gonna find out a way, right? I'm just gonna give myself a bit more time. I'll give myself 2, 3 months, right? And if things don't get better, then I can always end it, you know? And that was just a little deal I made with myself. It's a strange thing. That's pretty much the next day. This wonderful woman, her name is Ava, right? She's this Norwegian woman. She's old enough to be my grandmother. She's thin as a rail. She's out there working in a war zone with us, like just always smiling. She's like this little
yeah,
butterfly, man. She's just spreads joy everywhere. And I'm like, what is it about Ava? I just loved her from the very beginning. So she came over and she's got this Norwegian accent. She's like, "Hello, Manuel. How are you today?" Just checking up on me, like, "Are you okay? You're not yourself, Manuel." And she brought me this gift, right? That was from her daughter. It was
yeah.
called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. Have you
That's
heard of that
change.
book?
Um, I've heard of Michael Pullen. I'm not sure if that book that oh, I have heard of that book actually. Yeah, yeah, I have. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's it's all about psychedelics and healing. And he talked about PTSD, about depression, about the default mode network. He tied all of those things together. Excuse me. He's an investigative journalist, and he just completely went all in on this,
yeah,
as
yeah, yeah.
journalists do. And it was really amazing to see what he came out with. And that, for me as a paramedic, reading that, reading the studies, reading the actual, things that have been out there that was published, like actually, like Johns Hopkins University has done psychedelic studies. They've taken psilocybin mushrooms and effectively cured PTSD and
Wow.
depression, and helped people who are having, existential dread because of cancer, and they're gonna die. Like there's nothing else that can be done for them, and they're just in this state of constant anxiety and dread. And now they're just like, you know what? Life is okay. Life is beautiful, man.
Yeah,
They have a spiritual experience that they compare with having their first child, with the death of a parent, with transition in life status. Like that's how significant this experience was, like tripping once with mushrooms in the way that they design. So I read this book, but it didn't have everything. It didn't have everything. I also started to get into this spiritual path, which I know it's going to sound a little weird, but it'll make sense in a minute. I started to study shamanism, right?
yeah,
Because I
yeah,
noticed I noticed I like anthropology. So I like studying ancient humans because I feel that our modern society is not healthy for us. I try
yeah,
to look at ancient practices and how we can bring them into today's society to heal the human, but using modern science to prove it, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I saw how in MAPS, right, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies in the US, they were the ones who were curing people with mushrooms and with MDMA. So they would sit somebody down in a room, they would give them a hallucinogen, right, psilocybin mushrooms. They would tell them to bring in an object that has special significance to them, right? They would tell them to think things through, create an intent. Look at how you want to change your life. Imagine that future, right? What's your intention? Speak it, right? And then they sit with these two people who are essentially facilitators. They're like your guides in this process. Well, this looked exactly similar to Native American societies, where they would have a shaman or
Yeah.
two shamans, a man and a woman, give a hallucinogen to a warrior who had soul sickness, right? Who
Yeah.
had come
Yeah.
back from battle. Man, it gives me chills just talking about it when I read this. He had soul sickness or power loss. They would tell him, "You lost a piece of your soul. Look back to where you lost it." And the body tries to heal from trauma. They go back to their trauma as they're on this hallucinogen and they work their way through it in the same exact way. And they would be cured of PTSD and these different things. So there's
Wow.
some kind of, right? It could have been the medical aspect, it could have been the spiritual aspect, it could have been both. But when you take mushrooms and you go to a party, you're not healed, you're not fixed.
No, it's not
Something about
using
the
it. Yeah, it's not
exactly.
using it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be used as a medicine. It's about the set, it's about the setting, it's about the dose, it's about the delivery route, right? Sorry, I keep hitting this thing. I hope the audio still comes through good. Yeah. But it's amazing to me, man. Like, I'm reading about shamanistic practices
It's
being
going a
done
bit
today.
funny, mate. It's gone a bit crackly.
Yeah, how
Since
about now?
yeah, yeah. I think it sounds all right now. It's just yeah, it sounded a bit crackly there. So
Good.
yeah, wanna get yeah, yeah, yeah,
Good to go?
yeah, yeah. Cool. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So, what was fascinating for me, reading that book and then looking into the shamanistic spiritual path, I started to really be interested. I thought to myself, why didn't Native Americans have depression? Why didn't they have suicide? Or very rarely, if they did, as an anger or as a demonstration or as an act of desperation, but not the
Yeah.
way we do things today, right? Why didn't they have PTSD? Why were they so much more well adjusted? Now, modern society will always wipe out the societies that are smaller and stuff like that. So we dominated them, we destroyed them, but now we're degrading from the inside. I think there's a lot of things that they had that were very healthy that we need to apply to our modern lives so that we
Absolutely.
can be, because we're tribal animals and we're living in a modern society that has disbanded our tribes for the first time and it's not going very well, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
we need to find a way to heal and fix that. And using modern science, so for me, I tried to match both of those. I thought, okay, I don't want to go back to, the noble savage myth, right? We know that they had wars and they had all this crazy stuff and they had problems too. They
Yeah.
weren't perfect. So how can I match the best of the past with the best of the present? Take science and technology and try to meet it with these ancient practices that seem to be coinciding more and more today. So I started with plant medicine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Psilocybin mushrooms. I became a member of a Native American church. Um, I found one that you can actually join. It's called ONAC, Oakley Native American Church. They've actually had fights in the Supreme Court of the United States to get federal protection. The way things work here is you have city laws, then you have state level laws, and then you have federal level laws. Originally, the federal government was supposed to serve the states. Now we've become a bit authoritarian, right? Where the federal government is now the boss, and the states are fearing the federal government, right? It's not
Yeah,
how it
yeah,
was before. That's not how our country was designed. It's what it is now. So if there's a state that allows marijuana use, like California does right now, which I have a license for, I can practice in California. But at any point, a federal agent can arrest me for having that marijuana, even though it's totally legal in California, right? That
really?
wasn't That's not constitutional, but that's the way things are done now. Because right now the feds run the show. They actually become government. It didn't used to be that way. They used to support. They were obviously the government, but they were meant to support the states and the people. It's changed a little bit. So I actually have a membership that's ONAC, right, which is protected at the federal level. If a federal agent were to arrest me, they would actually be liable for any damages, right? I'm allowed constitutionally to have Native American traditional ceremonial medicines. So that includes ayahuasca, that includes peyote, that includes mushroom, it's cannabis, right?
Man, yeah,
Yeah.
man.
So this is something that's an avenue that's available for people who want to heal. Now, you have to be a spiritual person in order to become, acquainted with these things. The medicines will show you a lot of really amazing things. I will say that. I do believe that they should be used as medicines, right?
Of course. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
because a lot of, it's just like anything. You take a whole bottle of Advil, it will kill you dead, and
Yeah.
you can buy that in a store, but you take a small amount and it serves to relieve your pain. These medicines, when used in the right way, in the right dose, in the right set and setting, they create something called neuroplasticity. It's why if you microdose mushrooms, you can learn a new language with no accent, right? You can fix problems like stuttering. You can create new neural pathways in your brain that's not normally possible, right?
Yeah.
It allows your brain to kind of shape itself differently, the way you did when you were a child. So you can
Yeah.
actually regenerate part of the brain. That's why people with PTSD can be cured, right? People with depression, it can interrupt that. Sometimes it's just temporary interruption, but there's new growth that happens. It allows you to see things in a different way, right? It's really amazing. But
Yeah. Yeah.
big but, right? And this is something they're not talking about on Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss, which people should be saying. It can also go in a negative way, and I've seen it happen. So here's what I mean, right? If somebody has a particular family trait, which I found out is present in my family as well, I was very lucky it didn't pass on to me. But if there's any schizophrenic trait, then somebody who takes mushrooms can be lapsed into unremitting schizophrenia, at which point they will have to be treated. Whereas before, it may not have been triggered, right? So that's something to keep into account. Another thing is that if you take mushrooms, and let's say you don't have that family trait, you have no issues with that, right? And you have a perfectly normal trip. Well, you decide that for the next week, you're going to treat yourself very badly, let's say, because you haven't created a structure for yourself. Your brain is rewiring itself, no matter what you're doing. So you're teaching yourself some very bad things. It can take you further into a negative state as well.
Yeah.
I've learned my practice, you have to create a window of that neuroplasticity where you are very careful with yourself about here, let me be careful with that. I'm too much of a hands talker. You have to be very careful with yourself about the kind of habits and routines that you create around that neuroplasticity window. You have to create good habits. You have to have good diet. You have to take care of yourself. It has to be a very conscious and intentioned thing. And you should probably have somebody who's helping you through that time because you're going to be kind of like a baby again. A lot
Yeah.
of your ego defenses will be destroyed. There's a lot of things that suddenly won't make sense to you, or maybe will make sense to you that didn't before.
Yeah.
It's a very sensitive time, and it's meant to be handled with a lot of responsibility and a lot of integrity. And frankly, I'm not really seeing that out there today. There are some people who are doing it, but they're few, very rare, very far between. A lot of people out there who just try to take advantage of people like us who are trying to heal, and it makes me angry as hell, man. It makes me fucking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry about my language, but
No
for
worries,
for
man. No worries.
yeah, dude, but for somebody to take advantage of somebody who's already down and to kick them, or to take advantage of them and to try to take their money, I see it so much with these people who are doing ayahuasca mills in South America or even in the United States, people who are trying to give mushroom healing to people, but they're not guiding them properly. They're doing it irresponsibly or in big groups where everybody just comes out and trips together. That's not therapy. That's not healing. And that's not something anybody should be participating in. It's very irresponsible. Some people do it for the experience and for the fun, and you're all adults. You can do it as you like. But I'm telling you, this is stuff that can reshape your brain, right? It can reshape your entire life for the positive or for the negative. So do it for the positive. Use the tool
100%.
responsibly, right? Use it,
100%.
have some fun. If you want to, do it responsibly. We're all adults. But man, just understand what you're playing with, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, that was the very beginning. And that's when I started to learn by experimenting with stuff. I learned about, psilocybin, which was the first medicine. Currently, I've kind of stayed a little bit away from it. I've had several psilocybin sessions, which helped me a ton with PTSD, with depression. I've tried the ketamine treatments, ketamine therapy,
Yeah.
because recently I lost a baby that was supposed to be, about 6 months old,
Yeah.
and then after he died, after we miscarried, then the engagement fell apart, and it was kind of a lot to handle at the same time. I was ready to be a father. We had him named. I was changing my whole life around this baby.
Yeah.
Now I can talk about it, right, without crying or without breaking apart. But that was not the case 2 months ago. So I did ketamine therapy at first. I did psilocybin therapy as well, and then recently I started marijuana therapy, and that has been I cannot explain the difference it's made in my life, man. I mean, now I can, talk about my son that was supposed to be. I can talk about the relationship that fell apart. I can talk about my new direction forward in life and trying to help people. I'm active. I'm taking care of myself again. I take my supplements. I'm learning, I'm advancing in my career. These things, I was broken down, man. Like my life was at like I was living out of my car, just going from place to place, and not really, feeling good. It was maybe just a month ago that all of this started to come together, maybe even a couple of weeks, So you pretty much caught me at the perfect time, man, where it was just at the end of like tying things together, So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Man, that's powerful stuff. So sorry to hear about your child, man. Like,
No, I appreciate
we
that,
should
man.
experience that shit, man. But you know,
Yeah.
man, I'm glad you got through it, and you
Thanks,
know,
man.
you're back seeing the positives of life again, man. Stuff like that can really knock you for six, and like some people
Yeah.
don't ever recover from that shit, man. So you know, you're very blessed, and thank you for
Yeah.
sharing the story, man. Like, yeah, it's
Thanks,
quality.
bro. I
Cool, man. My
appreciate that.
pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah, man.
Thanks,
So,
bro.
yeah, well, that ties us nicely. Anything you'd like to say to anybody out there that might be struggling with times or with mental health or whatever's going on? Like any bits of advice from your own journey? Like you've given loads of advice, but anything like just to that would finish off the podcast.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I want to say that, to anybody who's hurting out there and to anybody who's struggling with mental health, like you're not alone. There's people all around you who are privately struggling. We're trying to create a community of people, who can reach out, talk to one another.
Yeah,
And I just want to say that life does get better, right? It will get better. And nothing, as hard as it seems, looking at all of this, it can seem huge, it can seem overwhelming, like a boulder that you just don't even want to look at or you don't want to address. I
yeah,
want to say that healing is nowhere near as hard and difficult as staying the same. Nothing will be as hard as today. It will get easier from here, right? As long as you start stepping in the right direction, it only gets better, right? Sometimes you could take two steps back, and sometimes things get messed up, and sometimes your life will just get thrown to pieces, right? My life completely dissolved recently. But even out of that, incredible and beautiful things can come from that. And you can get a good context for it. Just, reach out to somebody, start the healing process, find a mentor, find somebody. Even if you don't trust anybody at all and you don't see anybody that you're like, I want to be like that person, or I want to be like in that book, or I dream I want that thing. If you don't have any of that, just
yeah,
listen inside. Take two options, right? Okay, I can try a psilocybin therapy or I can try marijuana therapy. Don't listen to anybody else. Listen to yourself and try it, right?
yeah,
Do the
yeah,
research and listen to you. And if you can listen to you, then you'll know if it was good or if it was not. You'll see the result. Are you getting good results? No, don't do that again, right? Do
yeah,
something different. Be like an experimenter, right? It'll save
yeah.
you a lot of time if you listen to somebody. But if you can't, I know how it feels, then just start and things will get better. So that's what I would say. Don't give up.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to put there, man. That's good. That's positive. Really good words, man. And
Thanks,
that's
bro.
exactly that's the mission that this podcast is trying to do. Is trying to encourage people, like give them advice, pointers, and if they want to reach out, they can always reach out here and then guide them in the right direction. Like you said,
Right.
we're developing a community of people that are trying to battle this and get through it. And
Hmm.
heal
Hmm.
all humanity, man. Heal the collective.
Right
That's
on,
it.
dude.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Well, that's it. That's all we got time for. And thank you, Manny, again. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. No
Thanks,
doubt.
John.
Yeah, well, this country's on growing and developing. I look forward to having you on again, man. And good luck.
Likewise, John.
Yeah, man.
Thanks,
All
bro.
right.
Thanks for inviting me on and thanks for doing this, bro. This is awesome. Like I said, if it wasn't for
Pleasure.
you starting to pull this podcast together, a lot of stuff I wouldn't have realized, right? So good on you,
Yeah,
bro.
yeah, sweet, bro. Nice one. Nice one.
All right,
All
man.
right.
Until next time.
Cool, man. Peace.
'Cause I'll be there for you, 'cause we care for you. You're there for me too, my friend. I know it's hard sometimes when you feel left behind. Tell me what's on your mind. Why do this on your own? Yeah. 'Cause I'll be there for, 'cause I'll be there for you, my friend. 'Cause I'll be there for you, 'cause you're there for me too. Oh, yeah, there for